I still remember the day Grandma's video changed everything. But before I tell you about that moment, you need to understand what happened during the 20 years before it. For 20 years, I watched my parents choose my sister over me. Every single time, every birthday, every holiday, every achievement, every dream. It was always her, and never me. Growing up, our house looked normal from the outside. We lived in a quiet neighborhood. My father owned a successful business, and my mother stayed home most of the time. People thought we were the perfect family. But families can look perfect while breaking someone inside. My name is Emma, and I was the invisible daughter. My younger sister, Olivia, was the golden child. The rules were different for her. If she got a B in school, my parents celebrated. If I got an A, they asked why it wasn't an A+. If she forgot her chores, they laughed. If I forgot mine, I got punished. If she wanted something, she got it. If I wanted something, I was told to wait. At first, I thought it was normal. I thought maybe all families were like this. Maybe parents naturally loved one child a little more. Maybe I was being sensitive. But as I got older, the pattern became impossible to ignore. When I was 12, I won a regional science competition. I worked for months on that project. I stayed up late every night. I practiced my presentation over and over. When they announced my name as the winner, I looked into the crowd searching for my parents. They weren't there. They had skipped the competition. Why? Because Olivia had a dance rehearsal on the same day. My parents told me they were sorry. They promised we'd celebrate later. We never did. A month later, Olivia performed in a school dance recital. My parents rented a limousine. They invited relatives. They hired a photographer. They acted like she had won an Olympic medal. That night, I sat in my room staring at the science trophy on my shelf. Nobody had even taken a picture. I think that was the first time I cried because of them. Not because they missed my event, because I finally realized I mattered less. As the years passed, the gap became bigger. When I turned 16, I wanted a used car. Nothing expensive, just something reliable. My parents said money was tight. They told me to get a job and save. So I did. I worked weekends, I babysat, I tutored younger students, I saved every dollar. 6 months later, Olivia turned 16. My parents surprised her with a brand new SUV. I remember standing in the driveway watching her scream with excitement. The giant red bow sat on the hood. Everyone was smiling. Everyone except me. I asked my father how they could afford it. His answer still hurts. Olivia needs it more. Needs it more. Those 3 words stayed with me for years. Every time I felt forgotten. Every time I felt invisible. Every time I wondered why I wasn't enough. Olivia needs it more. By the time I graduated high school, I had stopped expecting fairness. I learned to survive disappointment. I learned to celebrate my own achievements. I learned not to rely on my parents. And maybe that's why I became stronger than anyone expected. I earned a scholarship to a great university. Not because my parents helped me, because I worked for it. I studied while others slept. I took extra classes. I fought for every opportunity. When the acceptance letter arrived, I was shaking. It was everything I had dreamed about. I ran downstairs to show my parents. My mother glanced at the letter for maybe 3 seconds. Then she smiled. Not at me. At Olivia. Because Olivia had just announced she was dating the captain of the football team. The entire conversation shifted. Nobody asked about my scholarship. Nobody asked about my future. Nobody even congratulated me. I quietly folded the letter and went back upstairs. That night, Grandma called. Grandma somehow always knew when I was hurting. She asked about school. I told her about the scholarship. She cried happy tears. She said she was proud of me. 3 simple words. I'm proud of you. Funny how something so small can mean everything when you've never heard it before. Grandma was different from the rest of the family. She saw people clearly. She noticed things others ignored. She treated me like I mattered. And because of that, she became my safe place. Throughout college, she called every week. She asked about my classes, my internships, my goals, my dreams. Meanwhile, my parents barely called unless they needed something, usually help for Olivia. Olivia always seemed to have a crisis. She needed money, she needed advice, she needed support, she needed another chance. And my parents gave her all of it, over and over again, no matter what happened, no matter how many mistakes she made. After graduation, I got a great job in another city. For the first time in my life, I felt free. I rented a small apartment, I built my career, I made friends. I created a life without constantly comparing myself to my sister. Things finally felt peaceful. Then Grandma got sick. The phone call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. My mother sounded upset. Grandma had been diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctors weren't sure how much time she had. Everything changed after that. I visited Grandma every weekend, sometimes every few days. I sat beside her hospital bed. We talked for hours, about life, about regrets, about family. One afternoon, she asked me a question. "Emma, do you think your parents love you?" The room became silent. I didn't know how to answer. Part of me wanted to say yes, because every daughter wants to believe that. But another part of me was tired of lying. So I told the truth. "I don't know." Grandma looked away. There was sadness in her eyes. Not surprise, sadness. Like she had known the answer for years. Then she squeezed my hand and said something that confused me. "One day, everyone will know the truth." I asked her what she meant, but she only smiled and changed the subject. At the time, I thought it was the medication, or maybe the illness. I didn't understand. Not yet. A few months later, Grandma passed away. The funeral was packed. Friends, relatives, neighbors, people whose lives she had touched. Everyone talked about her kindness, her wisdom, her generosity. I could barely hold myself together. Losing her felt like losing the only person who truly saw me. After the funeral, the family gathered at Grandma's house. The atmosphere was tense. People whispered about inheritance, property, money, possessions. And then something unexpected happened. Grandma's lawyer stood up. He cleared his throat and announced that Grandma had left specific instructions. Instructions that had to be followed exactly. The room fell silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the lawyer reached into his briefcase and pulled out a flash drive. A flash drive containing a video Grandma had recorded before she died. My parents exchanged confused looks. Olivia looked bored. The lawyer connected the drive to the television. The screen lit up. Grandma appeared. She looked older, weaker, but her eyes were sharp as ever, and the first words out of her mouth made the entire room freeze. "To my family, especially my son and daughter-in-law, there are truths you've hidden for 20 years. Suddenly, my father's face turned pale. My mother's hands started shaking, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in their eyes. The moment Grandma's face appeared on the television screen, something in the room changed. The casual conversations stopped. The whispers disappeared. Even the children who had been running around moments earlier became quiet. It felt as if everyone could sense that what was about to happen would change the family forever. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the screen. Across the room, my parents looked uncomfortable. My father kept adjusting his tie. My mother wouldn't stop wringing her hands. Olivia seemed confused, glancing from one face to another. Nobody understood why Grandma had chosen to leave a recorded message instead of a simple letter. But as soon as she began speaking, it became clear that this wasn't an ordinary farewell. Grandma looked directly into the camera. Her voice was calm, but there was a seriousness behind every word. "If you're watching this," she said, "then I'm no longer here to speak for myself. That means it's finally time for the truth to come out." The room became so quiet that I could hear the ticking clock on the wall. Grandma paused for a moment before continuing. "For 20 years, I watched something happen in this family that broke my heart. I stayed silent for too long because I hoped things would change. I hoped people would do the right thing on their own. But they never did. My father's face grew even paler. My mother looked down at the floor. A feeling of dread began growing inside me. Grandma continued speaking. Emma, if you're hearing this, I need you to know something. None of what happened was your fault. My chest tightened. I couldn't understand why she was saying that. What wasn't my fault? Around the room, relatives exchanged confused looks. Grandma took a deep breath. For years, your parents treated you differently. They gave Olivia opportunities they never gave you. They celebrated her victories while ignoring yours. They supported her dreams while expecting you to survive on your own. Everyone saw it. Some people talked about it behind closed doors, but nobody stopped it. Tears immediately filled my eyes because hearing someone finally acknowledge it felt overwhelming. For so many years, I had wondered if I was imagining things, if maybe I was too sensitive, if maybe I expected too much. But now Grandma was saying it openly in front of everyone. Then came the words that shocked the entire room. What most of you don't know, Grandma said, is why this favoritism started in the first place. Every person leaned forward. Even Olivia looked nervous now. Grandma's eyes seemed filled with sadness. 20 years ago, my son made a decision. A selfish decision. A decision that affected Emma's entire childhood. I looked at my father. His jaw was clenched so tightly that I thought his teeth might break. Sweat covered his forehead. He looked like a man watching his worst nightmare unfold. Grandma continued. When Emma was 5 years old, her parents faced financial trouble. The family business was failing. Money was disappearing faster than it was coming in. They were desperate. Confused murmurs spread through the room. I had never heard this story before. My parents always claimed the business had been successful. Grandma shook her head sadly. At that time, Emma's grandfather and I offered financial help. We were willing to save the business under one condition. We wanted the money to be used for both children equally. We wanted both girls to have secure futures. My heart pounded faster. Something important was coming. Grandma lowered her voice. Instead, my son made a private agreement with us. He promised that if we provided the money, he would create equal education funds for Emma and Olivia, funds that could only be used for their futures. Several relatives gasped. I looked at my parents, who refused to make eye contact with anyone. Grandma continued. The money was given, the agreement was signed, the future of both girls was secured. For a brief moment, I felt relieved. Maybe things hadn't been as unfair as I thought. Maybe there was some explanation. Then Grandma delivered the next sentence. But that promise was broken. The room exploded with whispers. My father shut his eyes. My mother looked as though she might faint. Grandma continued speaking. Over the years, nearly all of Emma's education fund was quietly redirected. The money intended for her future was spent on Olivia. My ears rang. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt as if the entire world had stopped moving. I remembered working multiple jobs. I remembered applying for scholarships. I remembered eating cheap meals in college because I couldn't afford anything else. All those years, I thought there simply wasn't enough money. But according to Grandma, there had been money. Money specifically meant for me. The shock wasn't limited to me. Relatives stared at my parents in disbelief. Several people began asking questions at once. The lawyer raised his hand, signaling everyone to remain quiet. Grandma continued. Emma never knew because the truth was hidden from her. Every time she asked for help, she was told resources were limited. Every time Olivia needed something, the money appeared. Cars, vacations, tuition support, personal expenses, the list goes on. Tears rolled down my face. Memories flooded my mind one after another. The used textbooks, the extra shifts at work, the opportunities I turned down because I couldn't afford them, all while the money intended for me was being spent elsewhere. Then Grandma revealed something even worse. The favoritism was never about love, she said. It was about guilt. The room fell silent again. My father suddenly stood up. "Turn it off," he shouted. "This is enough." The lawyer immediately shook his head. "Your mother specifically instructed that the video be played in full." My father looked furious, but he sat back down. His hands trembled as he did. Grandma continued. 20 years ago, Olivia experienced a serious medical emergency as a child. Thankfully, she recovered completely. But after that experience, her parents became consumed by fear. They convinced themselves that Olivia needed more protection, more attention, more resources, more everything. Over time, that fear turned into favoritism, and that favoritism turned into neglect of Emma. Several relatives looked shocked. Others looked as though they finally understood years of strange family behavior. I sat there trying to process everything. Olivia looked stunned. It was obvious she had never heard this explanation either. For the first time, she seemed to realize that the special treatment she received had come at someone else's expense. She looked toward me, but I couldn't meet her eyes. The pain was too fresh. Grandma sighed heavily in the video. "Fear explains behavior. It does not excuse it." Her voice grew stronger. "A child should never have to earn love by being perfect. A child should never spend 20 years wondering why she wasn't enough." Tears filled many eyes around the room. Even some relatives who barely knew me looked emotional. Then Grandma looked directly into the camera again. "Emma, I watched you build a life despite every obstacle placed in your path. You worked harder than anyone else. You succeeded without the support you deserved. I am proud of you." Hearing those words one more time shattered the emotional wall I had spent years building. I covered my face and cried openly. But Grandma wasn't finished. Her expression became serious once more. "And because promises matter, consequences matter too." The lawyer sitting near the television quietly reached for another folder. My father immediately noticed and looked terrified. Grandma continued speaking. "Everything I have said can be verified through financial records, legal agreements, and documented transactions. Copies have been provided to my attorney." The lawyer slowly placed the thick folder on the table. My father stared at it as though it were a bomb. Then Grandma delivered one final statement before the video ended. "And now the inheritance will be distributed according to the truth." The screen went black. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The lawyer opened the folder, and what he revealed next would leave my parents completely speechless. For several seconds after the screen went black, nobody in the room moved. It felt as though the entire house had stopped breathing. The only sound was the faint hum of the television. I sat frozen in my chair, my mind struggling to process everything Grandma had revealed. 20 years of questions suddenly had answers. 20 years of confusion suddenly made sense. The moments I had spent wondering why I wasn't enough, why I always came second, why my achievements never seemed to matter, none of it had been my imagination. It had been real all along, and now everyone knew it. Across the room, my father looked completely defeated. The confident businessman who always controlled every situation was gone. In his place sat a man who looked trapped. My mother's eyes were red from crying. She kept wiping away tears, but they continued falling. Olivia stared at the floor in silence. For perhaps the first time in her life, there was no attention focused on her. No celebration, no praise, no special treatment. Instead, all eyes were on the people who had created the problem. Then the lawyer slowly stood up. The movement immediately captured everyone's attention. He placed both hands on the folder Grandma had left behind and cleared his throat. "As instructed by Margaret," he said calmly, "I will now continue with the final portion of her estate plan." Nobody interrupted. Nobody dared. The atmosphere felt heavy. The lawyer opened the folder and removed several documents. Before her passing, Margaret spent nearly 2 years reviewing family financial records, trust agreements, and legal documents connected to the funds she established for her grandchildren. My father's face immediately tightened. The lawyer continued. "She wanted complete accuracy. A few relatives exchanged nervous glances. Then he looked directly at me. Emma, your grandmother discovered that approximately 80% of the education fund originally created for your benefit was redirected over the years. The room erupted into whispers again. Even though Grandma had already revealed the truth, hearing an actual number made everything feel more real. 80%, not 10, not 20, 80. I remembered every extra shift I worked, every scholarship application, every opportunity I had missed because money was tight. The anger I had spent years burying began rising inside me. The lawyer continued reading. Margaret considered this a violation of the original agreement. My father suddenly stood up. That's not fair, he snapped. Several relatives turned toward him. The lawyer remained calm. Sir, this is not a debate. These are your mother's documented instructions. My father clenched his fists, but sat down again. For the first time in years, nobody seemed interested in protecting him from consequences. The lawyer pulled out another paper. Because of this violation, Margaret revised her estate plan 3 years ago. The room became silent once more. My father looked terrified. My mother whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. The lawyer unfolded the document and began reading. To my granddaughter Emma, I leave my primary residence, all investment accounts under my personal ownership, my lake property, and 70% of my remaining estate. A collective gasp swept through the room. Several relatives looked shocked. Others looked impressed. I simply stared. I wasn't expecting anything. I hadn't visited Grandma because of money. I visited because I loved her. The lawyer continued. Additionally, I leave Emma all personal journals, family records, photographs, and heirlooms entrusted to me by previous generations. Tears filled my eyes. The money was one thing, but the family history meant more. Grandma knew that. She always knew what mattered most to me. Then the lawyer turned the page. Everyone seemed to lean forward at the same time. To Olivia, I leave 20% of my estate. The room became completely still. Olivia's eyes widened. For the first time, she looked genuinely shocked. Not angry, not offended, just shocked. The golden child had finally received less, much less. Then came the final part. To my son and daughter-in-law, I leave 10% of my estate combined. My mother gasped. My father looked as though someone had punched him in the stomach. The lawyer continued reading Grandma's words. This amount reflects the support already provided throughout their lives and the choices they made regarding my grandchildren. Nobody spoke. The message was clear. Grandma had made her judgment, and she had put it in writing. My father suddenly exploded. This is ridiculous! His voice echoed through the house. She manipulated everything. She only heard one side of the story. The lawyer calmly adjusted his glasses. No, sir. She reviewed financial records spanning 20 years. That single sentence shut him down immediately. Facts are difficult to argue with, especially when they are documented. The room remained tense. Then something unexpected happened. Olivia stood up. Everyone looked at her. For years, she had benefited from the favoritism. Many people expected her to defend our parents. Instead, she looked directly at them and asked a question nobody expected. Is it true? The room froze. My father didn't answer. My mother looked away. Olivia repeated herself. Did you really take Emma's fund? Still no answer. The silence itself became the answer. I watched my sister's expression change. At first there was confusion, then disbelief, then guilt. Real guilt. The kind that comes when someone suddenly realizes their success was built on another person's sacrifice. Tears formed in her eyes. She turned toward me. Emma, I didn't know. I believed her. For many years I blamed Olivia. But sitting there, I realized something important. She had been a child too. The decisions weren't hers. The favoritism wasn't her creation. She benefited from it, yes, but she didn't design it. Our parents did. And for the first time, I saw that truth clearly. Olivia sat down again and quietly cried. Meanwhile, relatives began speaking among themselves. Stories started emerging. People remembered things. One aunt recalled my science competition. Another remembered my scholarship. Someone else mentioned family gatherings where my accomplishments had been ignored. The more people talked, the clearer the pattern became. Grandma wasn't the only one who noticed. Everyone had noticed. Nobody had spoken up. That realization hurt almost as much as the favoritism itself. How many people had seen what was happening? How many people had stayed silent? The lawyer eventually raised his hand. There is one final matter. Immediately, the room became quiet again. My father looked exhausted. My mother seemed emotionally drained. The lawyer opened a smaller envelope. This contains a personal statement from Margaret. He unfolded the paper, then began reading. To my family, wealth can be replaced, time cannot. Opportunities can return, childhood cannot. For 20 years, one child was taught that she mattered less. The greatest tragedy is not the money that was lost. The greatest tragedy is the love that was withheld. Several people lowered their heads. The words hit everyone hard, especially my parents. The lawyer continued. If you wish to honor my memory, stop defending old mistakes. Admit them. Learn from them. Repair what can still be repaired. When he finished reading, nobody spoke. The silence felt different this time. Not tense, not angry, just heavy. The weight of truth had finally settled over the room. Then my father slowly stood up. Everyone watched him. For years he had defended every decision, excused every action, avoided every difficult conversation. But now there was nowhere left to hide. His voice shook as he looked toward me. Emma. I looked up. For the first time in my life, I saw regret in his eyes. Real regret. Not the fake kind people use to avoid consequences, the genuine kind that comes too late. He swallowed hard. Then he said words I had waited 20 years to hear. We were wrong. The room became silent again. But before anyone could respond, before anyone could process what had just happened, the front door suddenly opened. A stranger walked into the house. The man was carrying a thick file folder. He looked directly at the lawyer, then at me, and said something that made everyone freeze. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's another document Margaret wanted Emma to receive after the video. The lawyer's eyes widened, because apparently, even he didn't know about this document. The moment the stranger stepped into the room, every conversation stopped. The emotional storm created by Grandma's video had already left everyone exhausted, but suddenly it felt like another chapter was about to begin. The man appeared to be in his 60s, dressed in a simple dark suit. He carried a worn leather folder under his arm and looked unusually nervous. Even the lawyer seemed surprised by his arrival. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then the stranger slowly walked toward the table and carefully placed the folder in front of the attorney. I was instructed to deliver this only after the video was shown, he explained quietly. Margaret was very specific. The lawyer opened the folder and immediately frowned. His eyes moved quickly across several pages. Then he looked at me. A small smile appeared on his face. Not a shocked smile, not a dramatic smile, a satisfied smile. The kind of smile someone has when a puzzle finally makes sense. What is it? My father asked nervously. The lawyer looked around the room. Then he spoke. This is a second letter from Margaret. Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. The lawyer unfolded the letter and began reading. Emma, if you are hearing this, then the first part of my plan has already happened. The truth has been revealed. But there is one more thing I need you to know. My heart immediately started racing. Grandma's voice seemed to echo through every word. The lawyer continued. For years, you believed you were alone. You believed nobody noticed your sacrifices. You believed your efforts disappeared into the background while others received recognition. But I noticed. Every single time. Tears instantly filled my eyes. Even after her death, Grandma somehow knew exactly what I needed to hear. The letter continued. I watched you work jobs while others received support. I watched you build opportunities from nothing. I watched you choose kindness when bitterness would have been easier. Character is revealed during unfair moments, and your character never failed. Several relatives quietly wiped away tears. My father lowered his head. My mother couldn't stop crying. The lawyer turned the page. Then his expression changed. This part was different, more serious, more important. 3 years ago, I established a private trust. The room immediately became attentive again. The lawyer continued reading. The trust was created specifically for Emma. My eyes widened. Several relatives looked shocked. Even the lawyer appeared impressed. The letter explained that after discovering the truth about the missing education fund, Grandma had quietly taken action. She hadn't wanted revenge. She hadn't wanted another family fight. Instead, she wanted to correct a wrong. Over the next several years, she transferred assets into a separate legal trust. Assets nobody knew about. Assets protected from disputes. Assets protected from challenges. Assets protected from interference. The lawyer looked directly at me. Then he revealed the number. The trust was worth just over $4 million. The room exploded with gasps. Someone dropped a glass. Another person covered their mouth in shock. I couldn't even process the amount. $4 million. My entire life I had worried about paying bills, about rent, about student loans, about unexpected expenses. Now I was hearing a number that felt unreal. The lawyer continued. Margaret specifically stated that this trust was not intended as a reward. Everyone listened carefully. It was intended as restoration. That single word hit me harder than the money. Restoration. Not compensation. Not revenge. Restoration. Grandma wasn't trying to make me rich. She was trying to give back opportunities that had been taken away. The lawyer continued reading. Money cannot replace childhood. Money cannot replace missed celebrations. Money cannot replace years of emotional pain. But it can create freedom. And Emma deserves freedom. I closed my eyes for a moment. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Peace. Not happiness. Not excitement. Peace. The kind of peace that comes when a wound finally stops bleeding. Then the lawyer reached the final page. Everyone expected another financial surprise. Instead, they received something far more powerful. A final message. My family will be tempted to focus on money after this letter. Do not. The real inheritance is the lesson. The room became silent. The lawyer continued. If you love one child more loudly than another, both children suffer. One grows up feeling invisible. The other grows up carrying expectations they never asked for. I looked toward Olivia. She was crying quietly. Not because of the inheritance, because she finally understood. For years she had been placed on a pedestal, and that pedestal had damaged both of us. The letter continued. Olivia, if you are listening, I do not blame you. You were a child. The responsibility belongs to the adults. Olivia covered her face and cried harder. Then came the message for my parents. My son and daughter-in-law, if you truly regret your choices, prove it through actions. Apologies matter. Change matters more. My father broke down. Completely. The strong, stubborn man who had spent years defending himself finally collapsed into a chair. He looked older than I had ever seen him. Not physically, emotionally, like the weight of 20 years had finally landed on his shoulders. My mother moved beside him and quietly cried. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Nobody knew what to say. Some truths are too big for immediate responses. Eventually, the lawyer finished reading. The letter ended with one final sentence, a sentence that would stay with me forever. Emma, never measure your worth by the people who failed to see it. The room remained silent, and for the first time in my life, I truly believed those words. The gathering slowly began to break apart. Relatives left one by one. Some apologized for staying silent all those years. Others hugged me. Many simply looked ashamed. As the house emptied, only a few people remained. My parents, Olivia, the lawyer, and me. The evening sunlight streamed through the windows. Everything felt strangely calm. Then my father walked toward me, slowly, carefully, as though he wasn't sure he deserved to stand there. Maybe he didn't. He stopped a few feet away. His eyes were red. "I know I can't fix the past," he said quietly. I didn't answer, because there was no answer. Not yet. "I failed you," he continued. His voice cracked. I kept telling myself I was helping one daughter without realizing I was hurting the other. The words sounded sincere, for the first time. Not because he had been caught, because he finally understood. My mother apologized too. So did Olivia. And for the first time in 20 years, nobody made excuses. Nobody blamed circumstances. Nobody changed the subject. They simply admitted the truth. Healing didn't happen that day. Real healing never happens in a single conversation. But something important started. Honesty. Months passed, then a year. Slowly, relationships began improving. Not perfectly, not magically, but honestly. My parents made efforts, consistent efforts. Olivia and I grew closer than we had ever been. Without favoritism standing between us, we finally became sisters. As for me, I used part of Grandma's trust to create opportunities for others. Scholarships, mentorship programs, educational support for students who felt overlooked, students who reminded me of myself. Every scholarship carried Grandma's name, because her belief in me changed everything. Years later, I often visited her grave, not because I was sad, because I was grateful. One afternoon, I sat beside her headstone and smiled. The wind moved gently through the trees, and for the first time, I realized something. Grandma's greatest gift wasn't the house. It wasn't the inheritance. It wasn't even the trust. Her greatest gift was the truth, because the truth exposed a lie. The truth restored my confidence. The truth reunited a broken family. And the truth taught everyone a lesson they would never forget. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive through anger. Sometimes it arrives through honesty. And when it finally arrives, it changes everything.